Afternoon from Vienna. My name is Fariza Mukanova, and I work in the Chemical, Biological, Radiological, and Nuclear Terrorism Prevention Program of the Terrorism Prevention Branch of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, and I will be moderating today's virtual event. I'm pleased to welcome you all to this virtual talk, the third in a series of 6 events on the International Convention for the Suppression of Acts of Nuclear Terrorism, or ICSANT, and nuclear security. This initiative is part of the UNODC's project on strengthening the global fight against CBRN terrorism through raising awareness and promoting adherence to and implementation of international legal frameworks related to nuclear security. The project is funded by the Government of Canada, and I would like to express UNODC's gratitude to the Government of Canada for sustaining our long-standing efforts to promote ICSANT and enhance nuclear security worldwide. Now, ICSANT is a key legal instrument to effectively prevent and respond to unlawful acts involving radioactive material by non-state actors, including terrorists. Effective implementation of ICSANT enables states parties to the Convention to prevent these acts and avoid the impunity of their perpetrators, and thus strengthen national, regional, and international security. This virtual speaker series addresses some of the key aspects related to nuclear security and prevention of nuclear terrorism and ICSANT. The first 2 events of the series were held last year and focused on the issues related to border management in the context of ICSANT and on international cooperation in nuclear forensics and ICSANT. You can find the video recordings of the previous sessions on the UNODC's dedicated website on ICSANT at unodc.org/ICSANT. Now, today's virtual series event will discuss gender perspectives in the fields of nuclear security and prevention of nuclear terrorism, particularly in the context of the Convention. As part of its technical assistance to member states under complementary initiatives funded by the Government of Canada and the European Union, UNODC raises awareness on the importance of adherence to ICSANT and provides support to build the capacity of criminal justice officials of states parties to effectively implement the Convention. UNODC also works to promote that measures adopted by states to counter terrorism are in compliance with international human rights obligations and integrate gender perspectives. So it is with these considerations in mind that we designed this virtual session to discuss gender dimensions in the context of nuclear terrorism prevention and as related to ICSANT. Now, I'm pleased to say that we have brought together a panel of distinguished speakers from government and civil society organizations. And we will hear from Ms. Julia Gibson from Global Affairs Canada, Ms. Federica Dall'Arche from the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation, Mr. Niyom Kaseng from the Royal Thai Police, Mr. Hubert Foy from the African Center for Science and International Security, and Ms. Ludovica Bianchin from UNODC's gender team. Each guest speaker will be reflecting on a specific aspect of mainstreaming gender considerations based on their work and expertise, with an aim that together we will unpack the concept more comprehensively. We will welcome questions and feedback from the participants after the session. If you have any questions to UNODC's CBRN Terrorism Prevention Program team or to the speakers, or any reflection on the session, please email them to unodc-icsant@un.org. I will now show the email address on the screen as well, so you can take a note of it. And you will also see the link to our website. We will share your questions with the speakers, and responses will be provided in written in due course. I hope you will take a note of our email address, unodc-icsant@un.org. Okay, now I will stop sharing my screen again. So before I turn to the panel, let me begin by providing a brief overview of ICSANT. Now, the International Convention for the Suppression of Acts of Nuclear Terrorism is one of the 19 international legal instruments against terrorism that UNODC is mandated to promote by the United Nations General Assembly. The convention was adopted in 2005 and entered into force in 2007. It currently has 126 states parties. ICSANT provides a robust legal framework for states parties to cooperate in preventing and addressing nuclear terrorism and other criminal acts involving nuclear or other radioactive material. It establishes as criminal offenses certain intentional and unlawful conduct involving radioactive material, radioactive devices, or nuclear facilities. The offenses established under the Convention include a range of acts such as illicit possession or use, or threat of use of radioactive material or devices, or use or damage to a nuclear facility in a manner which releases or risks the release of radioactive material with the intent to cause death or serious bodily injury or substantial damage to property or the environment, or with the intent to compel a natural or legal person, an international organization, or a state to do or refrain from doing an act. It also established offenses related to threats of use of or unlawful demands for access to nuclear and radiological materials or facilities. Accordingly, under Article 5, ICSANT requires that states parties establish such acts as criminal offenses in their national legislation and make them punishable by appropriate penalties. Furthermore, ICSANT obligates each state party to take such measures as may be necessary to establish its jurisdiction over the offenses set forth in Article 2 of the Convention. ICSANT also facilitates international cooperation in criminal matters, providing legal grounds for extradition, mutual legal assistance, and the exchange of information on offenses set out in the Convention, inter alia. These provisions are crucial given the transnational nature of nuclear terrorism-related threats. So, as a key international legal instrument for ensuring a strong nuclear security architecture globally, universal adherence to ICSANT remains an important goal, as reiterated by the United Nations General Assembly most recently in its Resolution 79/55 adopted last December. This resolution called on all member states that haven't yet done so to become party to ICSANT as soon as possible in accordance with their legal and constitutional processes. In this context, our discussion today will allow us to look at how gender equality and women's participation and representation in policy making and normative work in nuclear security field can advance universalization of ICSANT. With this, I would like to turn to our panel and first introduce the speakers. Our first speaker will be Ms. Julia Gibson, a project leader in nuclear and radiological security at Global Affairs Canada's Weapons Threat Reduction Program. She has worked in the field for over 14 years and currently is responsible for managing a portfolio of projects related to illicit trafficking of radiological material, promoting legal frameworks, as well as other projects directly focused on promoting gender equality in the field of nuclear security. Julia leads Canada's programming engagements with UNODC, working closely with the UNODC Terrorism Prevention Branch to strategically address the universalization of ICSANT. Then we will hear from Ms. Federica Dall'Arche, a senior research associate at the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation and advisor to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy. She is a former policy advisor to the Italian presidency of the Council of Ministers. Federica's work focuses on arms control, non-proliferation and disarmament, and on gender in international security. She is the co-founder of the Young Women and Next Generation initiative under the EU Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Consortium. Our next speaker will be Mr. Nyom Kaseng, who is the Deputy Superintendent of International Affairs and Cooperation at the Foreign Affairs Division of the Royal Thai Police. In this role, Nyom leads strategic planning and operational implementation, provides international training and capacity building, as well as promotes global collaboration and provides strategic recommendations for high-level policymaking. Previously, Niyom served as the inspector of Interpol and Foreign Relations Asia-Pacific region at the Royal Thai Police. And among other responsibilities, he was responsible for facilitating international legal cooperation by coordinating complex criminal prosecution processes. Next, we will hear from Mr. Hubert Foy, an internationally recognized expert in nuclear security, non-proliferation, and international security, and also a gender champion in nuclear policy. He is the founding director of the African Center for Science and International Security, or AFRICSIS, and the recipient of the 2023 OPCW The Hague Award. Hubert has advised leading organizations, including the International Atomic Energy Agency and the African Commission on Nuclear Energy, and he contributes to global initiatives like the International Nuclear Security Forum. Last but not least, let me introduce my colleague, Ms. Ludovica Bianchin. She is a junior gender specialist in the gender team of the UNODC's Office of the Executive Director. In this role, Ludovica has led the Men's Engagement for Gender Equality initiative, has provided capacity building within the organization, and contributed substantively to the development of various publications on the gender dimensions of UNODC's areas of work. So thank you all for joining me today for this virtual talk. And I would like to start off our discussion by posing the first question to Julia Gibson. So Julia, gender equality and women empowerment are of high priority in Canada's foreign policy, including in its efforts to enhance international nuclear security, and Canada has been a strong advocate for that. Could you please share more about Canada's approach in this regard and why supporting women's meaningful participation and representation is important in the context of promoting universalization of ICSANT? So over to you.
Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Many thanks, Fariza, for the introduction and for the question. I appreciate this opportunity to address this foreign policy priority of Canada's and why in the field of nuclear security, building gender equality and incorporating gender perspectives in the fight against nuclear and radiological terrorism is so important. So Canada launched a feminist international assistance policy in 2017 to promote gender equality in our international assistance programming, and this includes in our peace and security programming. The policy focuses on promoting gender equality and empowering women with a view to building a more peaceful and inclusive world. To put the policy into practice, the Weapons Threat Reduction Program, where I work, implements projects that either directly target building gender equality in the field of nuclear security or other projects where a gender lens is applied to the activities that we're implementing. In terms of our targeted approach, our program aims to have a minimum of 20% of all of our funded projects include meaningful and sustainable gender equality results. To date, Canada has committed over $10 million to projects with a direct focus on building capacity amongst women in the nuclear security field. Incorporating gender equality in the nuclear field, as we know, is not always an easy fit. Projects are often focused on the provision of equipment and physical infrastructure. So some may wonder, well, why is it important to share or divert some of the focus from security to building gender equality? Well, for Canada, we believe that if we empower women, we will build a more peaceful and secure world. Without the inclusion of women's perspectives, we're missing out on seeing things from another angle, that of half the population. In the context of ICSANT, the instrument, as we know, is focused on criminalizing the unauthorized use of radioactive material, for example, in dirty bombs. If we link this with gender, given our biological differences, women are far more likely to suffer health issues and negative consequences if exposed to these sources, either accidentally or maliciously. It's therefore crucial to engage everyone who is impacted by the threat of nuclear terrorism. The fact that radiation impacts men and women differently and understanding the gendered impacts can change the way that women view radiological security as well as its importance. Canada takes the need to engage seriously. We want to include women And we want to be able to provide women with opportunities to engage in a meaningful manner by developing their expertise. We want to ensure that women aren't included as a form of tokenism. Rather, they're invited to decision-making tables, able to bring value and change. The objective of building meaningful participation of women in our sector has driven our choices of our projects and the activities that we have decided that we would support. For example, we seek to provide opportunities for women to advance their education in the field. This includes providing scholarships at the graduate level in nuclear security, non-proliferation, and nuclear law to women through the IAEA's Marie Curie Fellowship Program, as well as internships at the IAEA. Through the World Institute for Nuclear Security, or WINS, we're also supporting scholarships for women to support the certification of their competencies, and this is at the WINS Academy. We actively support building networks between women in the nuclear field with a view that by doing so, we will provide opportunities for soft skills development by way of mentorships, the sharing of leadership and empowerment strategies, and ultimately support for their career development. In terms of on-the-job training, another activity that we feel provides significant dividends, we're currently supporting a cohort of mid-career level women under the IAEA's new Lees-Meitner program. The program aims to build women's technical and leadership skills to boost their career development in the nuclear sector. And this professional program is actually set to take place this summer in Canada. Our view is that by strengthening the competencies of women, by supporting their studies, their professional development, and their exposure to nuclear security, we're laying the foundation for a sustained influx of female professionals contributing to this sector, and they're going to be able to participate in a meaningful manner at level with their male peers. In the context of ICSANT, through exposure to the field of nuclear security, we will end up building knowledge of the convention, how to become party, how to incorporate its criminalization provisions into legislation, along with an awareness of why it's so important for women to have a voice on the matter. In addition to these activities that directly target gender equality, we also support gender equality activities as an indirect component of our projects, including our projects that support the universalization of legal frameworks. For example, we currently have a project with Parliamentarians for Global Action, in which a key deliverable was the development of a handbook on the role of women parliamentarians in preventing the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. The handbook touches on the differential health impacts of radiation and why understanding such gendered impacts can change the way women view radiological security and its importance. Canada also works closely with UNODC on both fronts, aside from supporting today's webinar on gender perspectives in the context of ICSANT. Last fall, we supported the first annual ICSANT Youth Academy. The week-long event brought together young professionals from countries not yet party to ICSANT to review the convention, support their ratification efforts, and it included a session on the need for gender equality and perspectives in nuclear security, including in the context of ICSANT. Over half of the participants at this academy were women. So in closing, I just want to say that taking an inclusive approach to nuclear security by including women who are directly impacted is crucial to underscoring the importance of implementation and adherence to ICSANT, and ultimately this will enhance nuclear security regimes around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia, for highlighting these important considerations of gender equality and bringing women's voices to the nuclear security field, including in furthering our joint efforts towards universalization of ICSANT. This indeed links well to the broader framework of women, peace and security agenda, and I would like to focus on it a bit more and also share how we at the UNODC Terrorism Prevention Branch working with member states in relation to criminal justice dimensions, on the gender dimensions of criminal justice responses to terrorism. So I will start with the women, peace and security framework. Well, conflicts affect women and girls differently from men and boys, and comprehensive, effective engagement with women in conflict prevention and resolution is integral to long-term peace and security. As Julia mentioned, diversity and gender inclusion can also help address policy challenges, as having different perspectives, different experiences at the table is important if we want to make sure that policy works for everyone and if it's to work in sustainable long term. Now, in October 2000, the UN Security Council unanimously adopted Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. This was a landmark document, as it was the first time when the Security Council explicitly acknowledged the different needs, experiences, and vulnerabilities of women and girls in conflict-affected situations. Subsequently, the Security Council adopted other resolutions addressing and building upon these issues. And together with these 9 subsequent resolutions, Resolution 1325 forms the basis for what is known as the Women, Peace and Security, or WPS agenda. Collectively, these documents promote gender equality and strengthen women's participation, protection, and rights across the conflict cycle, from conflict prevention to post-conflict reconstruction. But despite that Resolution 1325 was adopted 25 years ago, the most recent Secretary General's report on WPS indicated that women continue to have limited opportunities to influence peace and security processes. Now, looking at the counterterrorism angle, with the development of the Women, Peace and Security agenda, there has been a welcome shift at the international level towards recognizing the distinct ways women, men, girls, and boys are involved in and affected by terrorism. United Nations General Assembly and Security Council resolutions, including those on WPS, in particular Resolution 2242 of 2015, recognized the differential impact of terrorism on the human rights of women and girls, and it called for the greater integration by member states and the United Nations entities of their agendas on women, peace and security, and counterterrorism. The importance of these commitments was also emphasized in the recent 8th biannual review of the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy. They were also most recently reaffirmed in the Pact for the Future, an outcome document of the Summit of the Future adopted in September 2024. And all these efforts, of course, contribute to achieving Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 5 on gender equality and women empowerment, particularly its target 5.5 that aims to achieve women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making in political, economic, and public life. Now, how UNODC is working in these issues. UNODC promote equality, non-discrimination, and respect for women's rights as key components of a robust criminal justice framework guided by the core principles of the rule of law, due process, and protection of human rights. Our branch, terrorism prevention branch's work in this regard aims to support states to consider ways in which men and women are differently affected by and involved in terrorism. We work with national criminal justice systems to build their knowledge base and capacities on gender-sensitive investigation and prosecution approaches. We work to empower women's voices in efforts to address terrorism and violent extremism conducive to terrorism. We also provide member states with the knowledge and tools to develop and adopt gender-responsive policies and approaches which promote the role of women in criminal justice and counterterrorism agencies, and strengthen coordination with the gender machinery at the national level. Now, why is that important? The increased participation of women is integral to achieving law enforcement bodies that are non-discriminatory, representative of the population, and capable of effectively responding to the specific needs of the diverse groups they serve. Women's representation in the judicial system also provides a number of benefits, and I will name just a few. Higher numbers of and greater visibility of female judicial officers can increase the willingness of women to seek justice and enforce their rights through the courts. Female judicial appointments, in particular at senior levels, can shift gender stereotypes generally. And more generally, women's visibility as judicial officers can pave the way for women's greater representation in other decision-making positions, such as in legislative and executive branches of government. Well, the representation of women does not in itself guarantee the mainstreaming of gender considerations at the law enforcement level or within the judicial system. It does, however, provide an opportunity for greater integration of gender considerations and for the identification of the different impacts of law enforcement work on men and women. Just a last point to mention that gender mainstreaming, normatively gender mainstreaming as a tool to support gender responsive measures and promote gender equality requires continued advocacy. And I think today's discussions is also part of this broader advocacy efforts. And with that, I leave it at this, and I turn to Federica, who may also elaborate on this and offer her insights. Federica, I would like to turn the floor to you and ask you, why is it important that we integrate gender perspectives in nuclear security and non-proliferation? You have researched this issue extensively, highlighting the critical need for gender-sensitive approaches in disarmament and in disarmament more generally. So could you please reflect on this and also perhaps share any good practices, initiatives that your organization has been implementing towards the same? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Farisa, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for the invitation and extend my appreciation to you and to the entire team at UNODC for organizing such an important event, especially at times like this, when these discussions, I think, are more critical than ever. Farisa, you mentioned my research. Over the years, my research, I would say, has focused predominantly on two angles regarding gender perspectives in nuclear security and arms control, non-proliferation, and disarmament more broadly. The first angle concerns the gendered impact of weapons, meaning the fact that weapons affect people differently depending on their sex and gender. And this, I think, is a very interesting angle, especially because there is a lot of skepticism regarding the need for gender studies, especially in our field, based on the misconception that at the end of the day, weapons are weapons, they are neutral, they impact everyone equally, regardless of victims' sex, gender, race, or other factors. However, these assumptions have proven to be simply outdated. A growing number of studies demonstrates that the effects of weapons are far from being uniform. For example, when it comes to chemical weapons, studies, including latest reports by UNODC, have shown that men are more prone to develop neurodegenerative disorders following chemical and biological attacks. And at the same time, women tend to suffer more significant long-term health consequences, particularly concerning reproductive health. And this can result in perinatal death, spontaneous abortions, and congenital disabilities, and so on and so forth. And if we shift our focus and attention to nuclear security and terrorism, which is the focus of this webinar, similar findings emerged regarding exposures to radioactive material, for example. There is an extensive body of research on this, but there is one particular study conducted by the International Law and Policy Institute, ILPI, that I found particularly fascinating. So ILPI, a few years ago, analyzed the data on radiation exposure following nuclear power plants accidents, such as Chernobyl and the 3 Mile Islands, following nuclear testing, for instance, in the Marshall Islands, and following nuclear weapons use, obviously in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And ILPI found that ionizing radiation disproportionately affects women. Women experience nearly twice as many radiation-induced cancers cases as men. And this disparity is attributed to metabolic differences and the fact that women have 50% more high-risk body tissues, including sensitive reproductive and fatty tissues. But this is just one example. There are many other studies, and a recent one published by the EU Commission, for instance, that demonstrates how there are also gendered barriers in accessing medical care in the aftermath of an attack. And this can cause delayed diagnosis and treatment disparities. Or there are also gender barriers in securing protection, for instance, in securing the protection of soldiers, for instance. And I'm referring here to what Julia briefly mentioned before when we talk about military equipment, for instance. As I said, there are numerous studies and research supporting these claims, and I would be happy to share further reference with those who are interested. But in the interest of time, I would like to touch upon the second angle of my research, which is women participation in negotiating fora. Over the years, I've analyzed trends, data, and the progress made in increasing women involvement in negotiation fora. And I've also tried to explore strategies to further enhance women's participation. There are many reasons why I personally think this is essential, beyond being a matter of fairness, first and foremost, because women should have the same number of seats at the table as men, given that decision-making processes impact their lives too. There are also studies that consistently demonstrate that when women participate in negotiations, the outcomes tend to be more sustainable, durable, and inclusive. And despite all of these well-documented benefits, however, progress not only has stalled, but in some cases has even reversed. For example, in 2022, only 16% of negotiators in UN-led and co-led peace processes were women, a set decline from the 22% reported in 2020. Even more alarming, as The Economist has reported just a few days ago, no women were included in negotiating teams for recent conflicts in Ethiopia, Myanmar, the Balkans, Sudan, or Yemen. And out of 18 peace agreements concluded in 2022, only one had a female signatory. And very similar rates, unfortunately, apply to treaty negotiations in our field. So what can we do? At the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation, which is the organization I work with, a few years ago, we've recognized these gaps and we decided to take actions. And so in cooperation with the Istituto Affari Internazionali and with the support, the very important support of the EU Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Consortium, in 2022, we decided to launch the Young Women and Next Generation initiative. This initiative was, and it still is, driven by the acknowledged gender and age imbalances among experts and practitioners in the field of arms control, non-proliferation, and disarmament. Our aim is really to address these imbalances by exposing college and university students, but particularly women, to arms control, non-proliferation, and disarmament issues, increasing their awareness, encouraging their participation in relevant discussion and decision-making processes with the hope that one day they will pursue a career in this field. Through this initiative, we organize outreach events at universities across Europe. We convene skill-building workshops, like how to write an essay, how to craft a policy memo, so on and so forth. But we also organize webinars on current events and pressing issues in our field, and we've established a mentorship program. Through this mentorship program, every year we match 20 young women. We select and match 20 young women with high-level experts in the field. As I said, again, the goal is really to equip young women with the knowledge and skills necessary to pursue a career in government or in decision-making positions, so that one day we can ensure a more diverse and inclusive expert community in the field. However, obviously, much more can be done and must be done. We need targeted policies that actively promote women's participation in peace negotiations and security discussions. We need governments and international organizations to implement commitments to gender inclusivity, especially right now and with countries that are questioning diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, or when we have countries where women cannot even talk or sing in public anymore. We need all stakeholders, academia, civil society, and decision makers to push for systemic change that recognizes that critical role that played by diversity in building a secure and peaceful society. I think, Farisa, that I've slightly overused my time here, so I apologize for that, and I will stop here, but I'm happy to respond to any questions that the audience might have via email. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Federica, for reflecting these important aspects of gendered impact of weapons, and also for sharing about these initiatives of VCDNP that supports young women in the nuclear security professions. I think these are very important initiatives. So thank you. Now, I mentioned earlier the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and I would like to invite Nyom Kaseng from the Royal Thai Police to speak about Thailand's experience in implementing this global framework at a national level, including in the security sector. Nyom, could you tell us about Thailand's approach to promoting gender equality within the police and security sectors in alignment with the WPS agenda? What worked, what did not, and how do you think women's representation in the law enforcement and security fields, including in the nuclear security, could be facilitated more? So over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and from Thailand is good evening. First of all, I would like to thank Farisa and UNODC ICSANT team for giving me an opportunity to share with you on today. And thank you for your introduction and questions. I wish to emphasize the critical role of gender perspective in Thailand's commitment to the ICSANT. We firmly believe that a sustainable peace and security cannot be achieved without the full and equal participation of women in all aspects of society, including the prevention of nuclear terrorism and counter-terrorism efforts. Thailand before 2020 was like other Asian countries which faced common problems for female to engage with sensitive information and security matters such as gender biases and stereotype, lack of guideline and successful model for female officer in police and security field, and family issues. That is the big problem as well to support for their position. However, we believe that gender equality is not merely a matter of social justice. It is a strategic imperative for enhancing national security. In Thailand now, female holds the police position at a high-ranking level in many bureaus and divisions as well. Women possess unique insights, experiences, and perspectives that are invaluable in understanding and addressing complex security challenges. Their inclusion strengthens decision-making processes, improve policy effectiveness, and enhance community resilience as well. In line with this understanding, Thailand has undertaken several key initiatives to promote gender equality and women's meaningful participants in our ICSANT efforts. First, strengthening women's leadership. We actively encourage our female officers to assume leadership roles within relevant government agencies, law enforcement bodies, and the police, as well as civil society organizations involved in counterterrorism, both in the UNODC activity and Interpol. Second, data collection and analysis. We are committed to collecting and analyzing gender disaggregated data to better understand the impact of terrorism on women and girls, and to identify specific needs and vulnerabilities. Then we engage our female officers to participate on field, to be the interviewer, be trainer, and be researcher by their own hands, to leverage their values by their hands, their hearts, and their heads. The third, capacity building. We provide targeting training and capability building programs for female professionals in areas such as counterterrorism investigations, border security, transnational crime, and cybersecurity as well. And the fourth, community engagement. It is one of the very important thing, because of when we actively engage women in community-based counterterrorism initiative, most of the officers are men, but how we can leveraging their local knowledge and networking to build social cohesion and resilience. The last one is advocacy and awareness raising. We actively advocate for the inclusion of gender perspectives in national and international counterterrorism policies and strategies. These efforts are guided by the Royal Police, that understanding that the women's empowerment is not only a fundamental human rights, but also a crucial factor in building a more peaceful, just, and secure world. However, in this case, we would like to thank you, the government of Canada as well. They indeed been actively involved in supporting Thailand in promoting the WPS agenda. Some of the two mentioned of our colleague from Canada, and I would like to mention two key things contribution to Thailand. The first is financial assistance. Canada has provided funding to the UN Women to empower women, prevent violence, and promote social cohesion in Southeast Asia, including Thailand. This funding supports initiatives that advance gender equality, challenge discriminality, and challenge to another norm. Because of when we use our budget, we also focus on our male officer. But if we when we get the support from the Canada, they also give the position, keep the seats, keep for training course and capacity building for our female colleagues. That it gives really good chance for our activity to promote women's participant and leadership in peace building. Another thing is collaboration and regional initiative. Canada has co-chair or workshops and forums with Thailand and other ASEAN member states on WPS as well, highlighting the importance of the agenda and working towards its implementation in the Asia Pacific region and ASEAN country region. And from those kind of important, I think many countries which have very stuck on how to promote. I think the manual and the structure and guidelines that UNODC already provide. I am one of the person who try to use that manual to implement on hands. But because I'm the male officer, when I try to implement, I need that some guideline, and those manual is very meaningful to me. That's why we believe that by fully integrating gender perspectives into our ICSANT efforts, we can create a more effective and sustainable approach to preventing nuclear terrorism and counterterrorism in this field for the female position. Thank you.
Thank you, Neo, for sharing your insights and informing on the initiatives and good practices from Thailand that are supporting women to build and advance their careers in the security field, including in counterterrorism offices. And maybe one of the resources that you'll also find useful is a handbook on gender dimensions of criminal justice responses to terrorism that our office has produced. So you can find it also on our website. But thank you for your reflections. Now I would like to turn to Hubert Foy and ask for his perspectives on this topic. Hubert, the African Center for Science and International Security plays an important role in promoting nuclear security across African countries, including through its work towards universalization of the relevant international legal instruments. Would you please share your perspectives of how you incorporate gender aspects in your work, in your projects, what challenges you face in this regard, and maybe also some good practices that can be shared with the audience. Over to you.
Thank you, Farida, for the kind introduction and for your insightful question. I would also like to take this opportunity to express my appreciation to UNODC for spearheading this critical initiative and to the Government of Canada for its unwavering commitment and leadership in advancing gender inclusivity in nuclear policy. Today's discussion is both timely and essential as we continue to address evolving nuclear security challenges. Integrating gender perspective is not just about representation. It is about effectiveness, innovation, and inclusivity in decision-making. Ensuring that diverse voices contribute to shaping nuclear security policies strengthens our collective resilience against emerging threats. In response to your question, I am pleased to share insight on how we incorporate gender dimensions into our work and projects, the challenges we encounter in this process, and some good practices that have emerged from our experience. First, let me start with a broad overview. At Afrisis, we firmly believe that promoting gender balance in nuclear security policy strengthens decision-making processes, enhances inclusivity, and improves outcomes. Our approach to integrating gender aspect stems from our pledges with gender champions in nuclear policy, and this includes capacity building programs. We ensure that our training programs and workshops actively encourages the participation of women by reserving spot, offering targeted support, and reaching out to networks that empower women professionals in nuclear science and policy. We also focus on gender sensitivity policy development. When supporting African states in adopting international legal instruments like the CPPNM, its amendment, and ICSANT, we encourage incorporating females in stakeholder participation and discussions. We also take a look at the mentorship initiatives. We pair emerging women leaders in nuclear policy with experienced mentors to build their confidence and expertise. Along those lines, we also collect data and perform analysis. We disaggregate data by gender, especially in project implementation, to better understand the gaps in participation and address them effectively. Let me now quickly talk about the challenges that we face. First, cultural norms and stereotypes. In many African countries, as you may already know, traditional gender roles limit women's access to education and careers in technical fields, including nuclear policy and security. We have also high underrepresentation in leadership. Women often face barriers in attaining leadership roles in nuclear policy, making it difficult to showcase female role models. Another good challenge we face is limited resources. Funding constraints sometimes prevent implementing comprehensive gender-sensitive programs. This is particularly true in Africa, requiring external support to sustain the momentum and build effort in promoting gender inclusivity. We also have experienced lack of awareness in some countries. Stakeholders may not always recognize the importance of gender diversity in nuclear security, and this requires additional advocacy and education. After speaking about these challenges, I would like to briefly highlight some good practices that have emerged from our experience. The first one is the idea of partnering with women-centric organizations. Collaborating with networks such as Women in Nuclear Africa helps to tap into existing expertise and resources to empower women in the field. Second, we have also identified that hosting gender-focused panels and discussions contribute to gender inclusivity. For example, in the past, the Center for Non-Proliferation Studies and AFRICIS organized forums that spotlight women's contribution to nuclear policy and provided a platform for their voices. Another example was in 2022, when the International Nuclear Education Network organized a special publication on the role of women in nuclear security that was published through the International Journal on Nuclear Security. Another good practice is developing gender-inclusive guidelines. With this, we believe that it could be helpful to develop a toolkit for policymakers on embedding gender considerations into nuclear security strategies across Africa. We're also looking at showcasing role models. We've seen that highlighting the achievement of African women leaders in nuclear security inspires the next generation and breaks stereotypes. And the final success factor that we have identified is a tailored approach. We design tailored outreach campaigns that resonate with the diverse audiences, emphasizing the tangible benefit of gender inclusivity in security policy. And this is particularly valuable for the African continent, where we have both diversity in language, in culture, in constitutional processes, and sometimes it's a bit challenging how to tailor this language to be able to resonate with our audiences. For example, just to look ahead, we think that at the AFRICIS we remain committed to contributing equitable opportunities and addressing the structural barriers that women face in nuclear policy across Africa. We believe that by integrating gender-sensitive approaches into every aspect of our work, we aim to contribute not only to stronger nuclear security frameworks, but also to a more inclusive and equitable society. Thank you, and I look forward to our Q&A discussion.
Thank you, Hubert. Thank you for bringing another perspective from civil society organizations' side, for indicating challenges which I believe might be common to other participants who are joining us today from different parts of the world. And I hope that the practices and good initiatives of AFRICSIS might be useful to our participants to learn from as well. So thank you for your efforts and for your remarks. Now, I spoke earlier about, I spoke briefly about UNODC's efforts to promote gender considerations in its counter-terrorism programming. Now, I would like to ask my colleague Ludovica Bianchin to tell us a bit more about UNODC's overall strategic approach in this issue. So, Ludovica, if you could share your insights about UNODC's strategic framework on mainstreaming gender and how the office has been supporting member states to integrate gender perspectives across its mandate areas of work. Any, again, good practices or recommendations that you derived from this work? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Farisa. I would like to start by expressing my gratitude to you and to the whole team for organizing this event on such an important topic. I would like to start by giving a bit of context. So despite the international commitments recognizing the relevance of the gender dimensions in UNODC areas of work, such as the Women, Peace and Security agenda that was mentioned earlier, when the UNODC gender team was established in 2017, the belief that UNODC mandate was gender neutral was still widely spread. So other common misconceptions included that women were always victims of terrorism, organized crime, corruption, and so on, and that they do not play a prominent role in organized criminal groups, terrorist organizations, or in law enforcement. However, the relevance of gender in shaping these dynamics within these criminal organizations and in the response to these crimes is now widely acknowledged. In the context of terrorism, for instance, men and women can be vulnerable in different ways when a terrorist attack occurs. Gender-specific impacts of terrorism on women and girls, for instance, may include gender-based violence, such as abduction, early and forced marriages, rape, sexual slavery, forced labor, and so on, as well as, in some cases, attacks on girls' access to education and restriction of freedom of their movement. It is important to state, though, that despite stereotypical beliefs, men and women both participate in terrorist organizations and activities. However, men and women are not monolithic groups. There is no single all-encompassing explanation for male and female radicalization. And drivers to join terrorist groups may vary in different contexts and can be connected to individual life experiences as well. Therefore, it is important to look at the context of specific cases and listen carefully to local men and women. The examples that I provided show us and give us essential information that must be taken into consideration when we design and implement strategies to enhance the effectiveness of our work. For instance, one lesson learned we gathered, which is also supported by research, is that in many communities, women, especially mothers, carry authority over and within families and communities. This can translate into them either radicalizing the community and their families even more, or it can potentially translate into them having a positive influence against violent extremism. This information, for instance, was integrated in one UNODC project implemented in Mauritania, where Murikidat, who are female religious leaders, were trained and empowered to provide alternative religious discourse to counter radical ideologies. Only in 2022, the Murikidat reached over 8,000 people, including segments of society that were previously overlooked, such as female detainees, families of terrorists, and mothers who are an essential part of the social fabric. Through their work, the Murikidats thus have helped to address gender inequalities in religious spaces where women have traditionally been excluded, but they also proved that women are instrumental in the prevention of violent extremism. So we're seeing a clear example showing how applying a gender perspective to understand the issues we're addressing can strengthen the effectiveness of our strategies and can contribute to the delivery of our mandate. But this is not the only reason why it is important to mainstream gender. Gender mainstreaming is also a human rights matter. The countries we work for and with have agreed on international principles and committed to advance gender equality in instruments such as the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, which was mentioned earlier, but also the CEDAW Declaration, the Beijing Declaration, and so on. Finally, promoting gender equality and women's empowerment is also a matter of public trust. For our work, we aim to serve the whole population, not just men. For this reason, implementing strategies that are not gender sensitive and that might thus inadvertently reinforce inequality can reduce the trust of our beneficiaries in our work. So we have seen a number of different reasons why adopting a gender lens in our work is essential. But how do we do that? And what does gender mainstreaming actually mean? Gender mainstreaming means looking at the implications of every activity that we implement on men and women, highlighting the different needs, experiences, and opportunities of different people because of their gender. It is a strategy to make women's and men's concerns and experiences an integral dimension in the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of policies and programs. Gender mainstreaming does not view gender as a separate question, but as an integral part of every stage of the programming cycle. It does ensure that women and men benefit equally from our interventions and that inequality is not perpetuated through our work. At UNODC, we also acknowledge how the experiences of individuals change according to how their gender intersects with other characteristics of their personality. And this is where the concept of intersectionality comes in. At UNODC, we adopt an intersectional approach to gender, which means looking at how a person's gender intersects with characteristics such as age, race, disability, religion, class, and so on. to create unique experiences as well, potentially intersecting forms of inequality. And in order to promote gender equality through an intersectional approach, the UNODC gender team works on 5 main pillars, which are first, institutional mechanism. We have a network of gender focal points throughout the organization that is involved in program development. The gender team is also included in the program approval structures, and all programs and projects go through a gender-sensitive evaluation. We also conduct capacity building for both staff and counterparts. The gender team is involved in interagency coordination systems with other UN agencies. We have been producing several knowledge products, and we are always involved in awareness raising. So to conclude, since I see that we are running out of time, I would just like to summarize our main learnings since the gender team was established. First, I would like to emphasize the importance of having a twofold approach. So on one hand, mainstreaming gender throughout the whole project cycle across all projects and all areas of work. And on the other hand, implementing gender-targeted projects on gender equality and women's empowerment. It is also crucial to conduct a thorough gender analysis. And while we do this, we need to be aware of our own biases and of the fact that these biases can influence our perception. And to support us in countering these biases and assumptions, it is fundamental to consult with local women's society organizations, allowing them to participate in a meaningful way in our work. And this requires looking at what obstacles they may face that hinder them from fully participating. For instance, if we're having a group discussion, does the environment encourage them to speak up and share their perspectives freely? Or are there factors that may make it difficult for them to join these discussions, such as caregiving responsibilities if they're mothers, or the issue of traveling alone at night, for instance, in dangerous areas if they have to reach a venue? And these are all questions that we need to ask ourselves when we want to engage with local women who can provide us with their valuable perspectives. I will conclude here, but I'm more than happy to respond to any questions if any should arise.
Thank you, Ludovica, for providing this overview of UNODC's broader efforts on gender mainstreaming, and for also reminding on the importance of applying intersectional lens to this work. Appreciate you also sharing some good examples from the projects that you led. Now, this brings us towards the end of our virtual talk today. It has been an interesting and enriching discussion. I'll just recap a few points. I know we're running slightly behind our program schedule. From a rights-based perspective, as all of you mentioned, women have the right to participate fully, equally, and meaningfully in international security policy making, including in efforts to prevent radiological and nuclear terrorism. These efforts encompass inter alia, having in place robust and sustainable legal framework for detecting, preventing, suppressing, and investigating unlawful acts involving radioactive material. Through today's discussion, we aim to shed light on the importance of integrating gender considerations in the context of ICSANT, and we learned about Canada's approach to further gender equality and women's empowerment in its foreign policy agenda. We discussed gendered impacts of weapons and related need for gender-sensitive approach. Speakers also highlighted the importance of women's increased representation in policy making, and shared some of the initiatives put forward by civil society organizations towards this aim. We also heard about Thailand's efforts to support women's career development and representation in the law enforcement and security sectors. And finally, we learned about UNODC's long-standing work to mainstream gender across its mandate areas, and how the office works with member states, including in integrating gender considerations in the counter-terrorism measures. So this concludes our virtual talk today, and I would like to thank all the speakers for your time, for sharing your insights and your expertise on this important topic. I would like to also thank the audience for joining us today, and I just remind you that we welcome your feedback and any questions or comments you may have. You can send us by email to unodc-icsant@un.org. I would like to once again extend UNODC's gratitude to the Government of Canada for supporting this virtual speaker series as part of the broader initiative on promoting adherence to and effective implementation of ICSANT. To our online audience, stay tuned for our next events in the virtual speaker series. For more information on UNODC's efforts to promote universalization of ICSANT and its effective implementation, please visit our website. With that, I will close the virtual event and I thank you. Thank you.